So today we have a really cool video, and that's because of just the intense value that it represents on the graphics card front. For those of you that are sort of trapped at home right now and looking for a good way to get a GPU upgrade in your system, or maybe you're just building a brand new system and you need a really cheap GPU that's also going to get the job done at 1080p gaming, this may be your answer. Okay, so what are we looking at here today? This is it's a graphics card, and this is actually an RX 470 that I got from a seller selling this as a mining GPU. And understand that the miner that was selling this GPU, probably offloading dozens of these, or at least several of them. I know there was at least 10 of this exact model that the seller was offloading. I bought 2 of them, and I did get a really solid deal. I got these for just over 50 a piece. I think they were like 52 USD a piece. And the only caveat with these is that they come with the mining VBIOS. So this is not the stock BIOS that he is shipping out these cards with. This is actually just pulled directly out of a mining system and put on eBay. And hey, if you're willing to pay some money for it, he's shipping them off. Now, the nice thing about eBay, and I've said this over and over, is that you do have some level of buyer protection. If you get a card and it doesn't work, it's just not functioning as normal, you can send it back and eBay is going to take the buyer side of things pretty much every single time. Now, these cards are the 4GB 470s. They are not the 8GB 470s, and this one is the one that I have not opened up whatsoever. So what we're going to do today with these cards, or at least this one in particular, is open it up, see what kind of condition we're working with, put it on the test bench, and get the gaming BIOS, the stock BIOS, back flashed onto this card. And then we're going to run some benchmarks to see what kind of performance you can get out of a card that might only cost you, if you can find the right seller on eBay or just maybe the right seller elsewhere. This card is not going to cost you much more than $50, $60 at the absolute most if you're buying one of these being advertised as a mining card, and you should get really good gaming performance at 1080p. So let's go ahead and open this thing up. And it's pretty encased here in bubble wrap. This came in a box of peanuts. That's packing peanuts. So this is the second 470, and I have not cleaned these cards up whatsoever. And the good news with this particular seller is everything is not caked in dust. There is a thin layer of dust, but it's pretty thin. It's not caked on the fan, so it looks like either he already blew off these cards and sort of cleaned them up a little bit before selling them, or they just were never that dirty in the first place, which I'm kind of hoping is the case, is that it was just a clean environment in general. But we're going to get this card put into the test bench over there, and we're going to get this VBIOS flashed over. Now, to understand what we're doing here, there are a number of videos on how to actually do this. It's actually a really simple process, and you will need to go to Tech PowerUp site, and you're going to need 2 things. You're going to need ATI Flash, and I'll leave a link down below to that, but you're also going to need to use Tech PowerUp's VBIOS database and find the right VBIOS for whatever card it is you're buying. If you're buying 470s like this, you're going to want this card's obviously VBIOS, but if you're buying something like a 480, 580, 570, or just any number of other cards, you're going to need the VBIOS off of Tech PowerUp site, and I'll leave a link to their database down below. Basically, you just put in the right information, and it gives you the cards that fit the database entry that you put there. So I'm going to leave those links down below, but let's go ahead and get this over to the test bench and get things flashed over. Now, as I was getting these cards actually flashed over to their stock VBIOS, an interesting thing sort of happened here, in that one of the cards had been flashed to a mining RX 570 VBIOS, while the other one was actually still on a 470 VBIOS. So the 470 would only flash with a 470 BIOS, and that would be a stock 470 BIOS, and now the 571, which is actually still the exact same card, would only flash with the VBIOS of a RX 570. So what I ended up with here is an RX 470 that is an RX 470 in the VBIOS, and we have an RX 470 that became an RX 570 through the VBIOS. Now, obviously, it didn't actually become a 570, but if you are familiar with flashing some of these 470s and 480s over to be 570s and 580s, there might actually be a little bit of extra performance in the one that now has the VBIOS of an RX 570. A lot right there, I know, but I will probably actually compare these two cards just to understand the benchmarks you're about to see come from the one with the RX 470 VBIOS. And again, the test bench is a Ryzen 1800X paired with 16 gigabytes of DDR4 memory running at 3000 megahertz. So with all that aside, let's hop into the benchmarks and see how this card did. So first up, we have Metro Exodus at 1080p. We saw an average of 56 in the built-in benchmark, which could easily be bumped up to 60 FPS if you just play with the settings just a little bit. So really good performance there. Now the Borderlands 3 built-in benchmark was a little bit peculiar in that I was definitely seeing a little bit of a stutter just here and there, though towards the end of the benchmark that did seem to clear itself up a little bit. All that being said, I still saw an average FPS of 64 at 1080p with the medium preset on DirectX 11. Obviously you'd want to try out DirectX 12 now that it's out of its sort of beta phase in Borderlands 3 just to see which one gives you better performance. And then the 1% low was 44 with a 0.1% low of just 15. Again, that likely goes back to that stuttering I saw towards the beginning of the built-in benchmark. Finally, in Red Dead Redemption 2, using the Vulkan API at 1080p on the balanced preset, everything was actually really smooth even though we just saw an average FPS of 42. 1% low was at 32 and a 0.1% low was at 29. But again, it was a very consistent average FPS there. I didn't see a lot of spikes or dips. So I guess this just brings us back to the conclusion time for this video. This is a great way to get up and running with a solid 1080p graphics card. Now, this is not the end-all be-all. There are safer ways, we'll call it, to put together a PC that's going to give you great 1080p or even 1440 4K performance, whatever you're looking for. But the great thing about this, especially in a time where you might be a little bit pinched on funds, is that this will get you up and running very inexpensively. Now, obviously, you don't have warranty support in the long term, but if the card shows up and is either dead or it dies immediately after you put it in your system, you don't really get much use out of it, then you can return it through eBay, and eBay is going to take the buyer's side pretty much every single time if it comes down to a broken GPU or just a GPU that was misadvertised. Maybe it's advertised as used but working, but it's actually not working at all because it won't function properly or whatever. eBay does give you at least some level of buyer protection there, and this is by far the cheapest way to get out there up and running in a world where you might not have access to Facebook Marketplace because maybe you're not allowed or not supposed to leave home. I know the stay-at-home orders in the United States are pretty easy to get around if you want to, but depending on where you are, you may not be able to leave home whatsoever. And by the way, I am absolutely not endorsing running out of home and meeting up with people. Right now, you should stay home, and if you're gonna stay home, this is a great way to get your hands on a card for cheap. It's gonna get you up and running. So let me know what you think about buying these old mining cards. And of course, if you like the video, you wanna see more like it, give this video a like, share, subscribe, comment, all those things. Very helpful for the channel. You can follow me both on Instagram and on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware. And as always, I'll let YouTube queue up a couple more videos from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware. I'll see you guys in the next video.